So good evening, welcome, and thank you all so very much for joining us. My name is Leah Frieden, and I'm a reference librarian at the Fayetteville Public Library. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who made this event possible. The University of Arkansas MFA program in Creative Writing and Translation, the J. William Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences, the Department of English, the Walton Family Foundation, the Fayetteville Public Library, and the James E. and Ellen Wadley Roper Professorship in Creative Writing. Thank you. And with that, I will turn things over to Professor Jeffrey Brock.
Thanks, Leah. Welcome, everyone. We've got a great crowd. Thanks to all of you for joining us to enjoy tonight's reading with us. It's the University of Arkansas MFA program's honor to host Patricia Smith tonight as this year's Walton visiting poet. First, Hiba Tahir will introduce Patricia, then Patricia will read from her work, and finally, I will moderate a brief Q&A at the end. So get ready to type any questions that might occur to you into the Zoom chat bar when that time comes. Hiba Tahir is a former Tin House editorial intern and a third-year MFA candidate in poetry at the University of Arkansas, where she has received the Walton Fellowship in Creative Writing and the J. Chester and Frida S. Johnson Graduate Fellowship. A former award-winning humor columnist, she currently serves as editor for the University of Arkansas Honors College and social media director for Open Mouth Literary Center. Her work has appeared in New South and is forthcoming in Hobart After Dark and Zone 3. Hiba, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm just gonna get started. Patricia Smith's latest collection, Incendiary Art, explores the role of fire in Black lives, as well as the ongoing violence Black communities suffer at the hands of the police, white supremacy, and complicit witnessing. The collection centers a series of poems about Emmett Till, a 14-year-old Black boy who was brutally lynched in Mississippi in 1955, and, after his mother insisted on an open casket funeral, helped spark the civil rights movement. The collection features several choose-your-own-adventure poems that examine what might have happened if, for instance, Emmett Till had visited Nebraska instead of Mississippi, or if his casket had been closed instead of open, or if his body had never been found. It took 50 years to get the first memorial to Emmett Till erected in Tallahatchie County, Mississippi, the site of the lynching. The original sign was stolen and never recovered. The next two signs were riddled with bullet holes. The fourth marker, erected in 2019, came with bulletproof glass, reinforced steel, and surveillance cameras. It's a harrowing reminder of the violence enacted on Black bodies, a violence that's intimately examined in this collection, and a message that's just as vital today as it was when the book was published in 2017. In an interview with the Normal School, Patricia Smith said, regarding the collection's ending, "I didn't want to signal a direction, a moral, or any attempt to tie up loose ends. I intended the undercurrent of the book to be numbing and chaotic. Those gunshots between the turning pages, I wanted those shots to resound from first page to last. And what a resonance. Incendiary Art won the 2018 Kingsley Tufts Award, the 2017 LA Times Book Prize for Poetry, and an NAACP Image Award, in addition to being a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the Neustadt International Prize for Literature. Patricia Smith is the author of 8 books of poetry, including Blood Dazzler, which was a National Book Award finalist, and Tea House of the Almighty, which was the National Poetry Series selection. She is also a 4-time National Poetry Slam champion, the most successful poet in the competition's history. Patricia, a Guggenheim Fellow, a Lenore Marshall Prize winner, and a National Endowment for the Arts grant recipient, among many, many other accolades, is a distinguished professor for the City University of New York and an instructor in the MFA program at Sierra Nevada University and in the Vermont College of Fine Arts postgraduate residency program. Her work has appeared in Poetry, the Paris Review, the Baffler, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Tin House, and in Best American Poetry, Best American Essays, and Best American Mystery Stories. It is my great delight and immense honor to welcome Patricia Smith.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a fantastic introduction. And it made me feel really old, but that's okay. Thank you for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here and excited to talk up close and personal with some MFA students tomorrow. That'll be fun. I have my books here to the left of me and a couple of new poems on my computer. And I pride myself, which I probably shouldn't, on not having a reading list next to me. So I'm going to be grabbing some things. This is what I felt like reading first because I was thinking about my dad. Okay. The recipe for hot water cornbread is simple. Cornmeal, hot water. Mix till sluggish, then dollop in a sizzling skillet. When you smell the burning begin, flip it. When you smell the burning begin again, dump it onto a plate. You've got to wait for the burning and get it just right. Before the bread cools down, smear it with sweet salted butter, smash it with your fingers, crumble it up in a bowl of collard greens or buttermilk. Forget that I'm telling you, it's the first thing I ever cooked, that my daddy was laughing and breathing and no bullet in his head when he taught me. Mix it till it looks like quicksand, he'd say, till it moves like a slow song sounds. We'd sit there in the kitchen, licking our fingers and laughing at my mother, who was probably scrubbing something with bleach or watching Bonanza or thinking how stupid it was to be burning that nasty old bread in that cast iron skillet. She always used whole milk and eggs and baked her cornbread until it was plump and sugary. And she'd branded me hopeless as a homemaker, too damn interested in sitting in the kitchen in the half dark, learning nothing at all from a man who added other women that stayed out late on Saturday nights. When I told her I wanted to be the best cook in the world and that my daddy was teaching me to cook hot water cornbread, she sniffed and kept mopping the floor over and over in the same space. So here's how you do it. You take out a bowl, like the one we had with blue flowers and only one crack. You put the cornmeal in it. Then you turn on the hot water and you let it run. And you tell the secret about the boy who kissed your cheek after school, or about how you really want to be a reporter instead of a teacher or a nurse like Mama said. And the water keeps running while Daddy says you will be a wonderful writer and you will be famous someday. And when you get famous, if I sent you some money and wrote you a letter, would you write about me? And he is laughing and breathing and no bullet in his head. So you let the water run into this mix until it moves like mud moves at the bottom of a river, which is another thing Daddy said. And even though I'd never even seen a river, I knew exactly what he meant. Then you turn the fire way up under the skillet and you pour in this mix that moves like mud moves at the bottom of a river, like quicksand, like a slow song sounds. That stuff pops something awful when it first hits that blazing skillet. And sometimes Daddy and I would dance to those angry pop sounds. He'd let me rest my feet on top of his while we waltzed around the kitchen and my mother huffed and puffed on the other side of the door. When you are famous, Daddy asked me, will you write about dancing in the kitchen with your father? I say everything I write will be about you. Then you will be famous too. And we dip and swirl and spin, but then he stops and sniffs the air. The thing about hot water cornbread is you have to remember and wait for the burning so you know when to flip it. And then again, so you know when it's crusty and done. Then eat it the way we did, with our fingers, our feet still tingling from dancing. But remember that sometimes the burning takes such a long time. And in that time, sometimes poems are born. Now I'm going to read a poem about my mom. I am from Chicago, And I'm from the west side of Chicago, and that's the part of town everybody tells you to stay away from. And so I'm a west side woman, and my mom was a west side woman. And the other day I started wondering about this perfume I used to buy my mother. It's called Evening in Paris. It cost about $2 a gallon. And we used to buy it for every occasion, Mother's Day, the next Mother's Day, Father's Day, so you could give it to your mother. You know, we just keep buying it. And I was wondering if it was still around. And I remembered that my mother called it Smell Good, like it was one word. So this is a poem about that. Burly Alabama gal called it Smell Good. And she sloshed that flashy slap of Evening in Paris over and into everything. She spritzed it into bath water, already reeking of 2 violet bubbles, used it to finish off her stringy hair once it was suitably tamped down with oil and ironed, soaked cotton balls and popped them into the corners of bureau drawers, crammed with Baptist-sanctioned panties and Playtex. Chicago meant North Star. Chicago said, stink pretty. That flowery ruckus, dime store exotic, clung to my mother, bled into her skin, pummeled the air she'd escaped to. It trailed her like the train of a shredding gown, to the corner store, to the check cashing place, to the front pew of Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church, to the assembly line of Leaf Brands Candy Company, where she stuffed sugared shells with toxic chocolate. Everyone knew everywhere she was gonna be and had been, and I knew better than to ask her if she even knew where Paris was, or why its evenings boomed the way they did, or why those midnight blue bottles of her preferred perfume were always lined up right next to the register at Woolworths, each one cheaper than a back-to-school pack of notebook paper. Chicago said, reek like a city girl. Chicago said, reek like a city girl. So for years, she pummiced rough feet raw to rid them of that dogged Alabama dust, flinched every time and ain't never, or they done been had, slipped out into the world around her tongue. She slathered on creams that steadily dyed her unearthly bright, plucked nappy hairs from her chin, scarred her scalp with lye and fiery combs, studied at the prim pink feet of Lucille Ball. Chicago screeched, you looking like new money, Annie Pearl. You smell just like a white woman. But Chicago lies out of habit. It has always outright lied to its migrants with its rugged mouth. It lies like a head of processed hair under the red lights of last call. If you want truth, press your nose against the landscape of a West Side woman. Smell the Saturday morning Chitlin assembly line, the spew of roach spray, that jar of grease in that can by the stove. Smell that double Dutch sweat, pressing oil, scorched roots and the burn scar. Smell that dimming remnant of southern dust, the unmade Murphy bed screeching into wall, that trapped mouth skittering rumba in the hallway, the wild red price tag of discount Remy. Chicago says, ain't no otherwise to you, woman. Smell a West Side woman and you will no doubt ride the sugary stench of the side of the city she is. You will smell Evening in Paris and Way Too Late in Lawndale, twice fried perch glued with hot sauce to its cardboard box, Wonder Bread dripping with scrapings and pot liquor. You will smell mothers, obsessed with Sears catalogs and reaching for countries they will never see. You will smell every lie Chicago ever told them, all those bladed syllables that named them holy and made them impossible to love. Don't you hate it when people scroll through the books because they don't know what they want to read? I think I will read. Okay. First friction. I was 12, too young to be left alone mornings after Mama packed her paper hat and sugar-dusted shoes to push gumballs down the assembly line. So I was unceremoniously dumped at the door of old Mrs. Gore's mouse-addled basement hovel, where the matron of snapping gum and gray grin ushered me in and plopped me down in a chair that stank of a dog they didn't own. Seeing how I was bleary and unslept, Mrs. Gore would open the door to the bedroom where her twin girls, Kathy and Karen, still dreamed on the edge of alarm. Peppery, flailing, their waking bodies unwound to carve me room. I don't know how it started, how, wordlessly, Karen and I tussled skin, adjusted knee, naturally knew the repeating mouth and its looping stanza. She smelled like what I couldn't stop swallowing. Content to thrive on a flickering cinema of ourselves, our eyes fluttered, never fully opened. We pretended a blazing slumber, hushing the grind, the soft rustle of sparse sweating pubic, even after her unsuspecting sister stretched and tumbled out to begin her day. Strange, she didn't suspect our engine. For as long as we could, Karen and I stayed prone in exquisite pressurized tangle beneath the knotty orange chenille. We kept up the being blind, crashing into dampening borders until her fat mother shuffled in to rouse us, throwing shades open to the damnable day, introducing the stupid, useless notion of language again. By then, there was a drum buried in our bellies. We stank like men, all up under that sweet funk that first sin leaves behind. To rescue my mouth. All right. This is for old Black men, my favorite segment of the population. You can't get over with anything on an old Black man because they've done everything before. It's like the internet, we had that back in 42. Remember that internet thing, Earl? And Earl says yes, and then you're listening and you think, oh, that's right, they must have had the internet. Okay. My million fathers still hear past. Hallelujah for grizzled lip, snuff chew, bended slow walk, and shit talking. Praise fatback, pork gravy, orange butter, Alaga syrup, grits, and egg sandwiches on Wonder Bread, slathered with Hellmann's, smashed between sheets of wax paper. You hoard that food like money. You are 3-day checker games, pomade slickback, deep brown drink sucked through holes where teeth once was. You're that cat can't shake lyric, that last bar stool before the back door. All glory to the church deacons, bodies afloat and pressed to surge, nappy nods of gray hair greased flat, close to conch, cracked tenors teetering and testifying. Bless you, postmen and whip cloth shoe shiners, foremen with burning backs, porters bowing deep. I hear swear scowling and gold tooth giggling over games of bid, whisk, and craps. Then Sunday lucky struck voices playing call and response with a good book siren song. In the midst of some hymn, my wilting fathers, I see you young again. You spit-shined and polished, folded at the hips on a sluggish greyhound, or colored in the colored car of a silver train, chugging past Pine Bluff, Aliceville, Mineola, Greenwood, Muscle Shoals, headed north where factories pumped precise gospel and begged you inside their open mouths. You're the reason the Saturday moon won't fall. You're a male's order zoot suit, wide wing felt hats, the dip low over one eye, pimp walking, taps hammered into heels, kicking up hot foot to get down one time, slow drag blues threading bone and hemp up with a jukebox teases. All praise to the eagle what flew on Friday, and the Lincoln Mark, the Riviera, the deuce and a quarter, the always too much car for what you were. You were lucky number, the dream book, the steaming spoon of black eyes on day one of every year. Here is to your mojo, your magic reel, roots and conjures and long dead plants in cotton pouches. Deftly misled by tiny religions, you spat on the broom that brushed your foot, stayed left of the light poles. Griots of slope porch and city walk, you, my million fathers, still here past chalk outlines, dirty needles and prison cots, still here past ass whoopings, tree hangings, and many calls to war, past JB stupor, absent children, and drive-bys. You survive, scarred and hobbling, choking back dawn ache, high pressure, dimming and lined eyes, joints that smell thunder. Here's to the secret of your rotting molars, that tender bump on your balls, your misaligned back, wild corn on that baby toe, the many rebellions of your black, tired bodies. I watch you cluck the hard history of lust past your gums, squeeze your eyes shut to conjure the dream outline of a woman. I am a woman. I will rub your weary head, dance close to you, shuck you silver peas for dinner. He was Otis, my father, but you are Willie Earl and James and Ernest and Jimmy Lee, all of you, frail charmers, gentle Delta, bodies curled against the time gone, the time coming. I grieve you tottering toward death. I celebrate you clinging to life. Open bony dark vein arms and receive me, a woman in the shape of your daughter, who is taking on your last days as her very blood, learning your whispered language too late to stop your dying, but not too late to tell this story. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of things from Incendiary, and then I'm going to read something that is relatively new. Okay. I'll do this first. Okay. Incendiary Art. The city streets are densely shelved with rows of salt and packaged hair. Intent on air, the funk of crave and function comes to blows with any smell that isn't oil. The blare of storefront chicken settles on the skin, and mango spritzing drips from razored hair. The corner chefs cue pork, decide again on cayenne, fry in grease that's glopped with dust. The sizzle of the feast adds to the din of children strutting slant, their wanderlust and cussing, plus the loud and tactless hiss of dogged hustlers bellowing past gust of peppered breeze, that fatty, fragrant bliss in skillets. All our rampant hunger tricks us into thinking we can dare dismiss the thing men do to boulevards, the wick their bodies be. A city strapped for art delights in torching them, at first for kicks, to waltz to whirling sparks, but soon those hearts thud thinner, whittled by the chomp of heat. Outlined in chalk, men blacken and blaze apart. Their blindly rising fume is bittersweet, although reversals in the air could fool us into thinking they weren't meant as meat. Our sons don't burn their cities as a rule, born as they are, up to their necks in fuel. Back a little bit. Incendiary Art, Ferguson, 2014. They should have left him there to be the center of his own altar. Shat upon, he would have flowered. His empty hands tucked, ass upended like a newborn. The lengthy streak of browning blood could be a sanctified walkway for the church ladies, for the pokers with their sticks, for the lawbreakers and abiders, for that new kind of worship. They should have taken advantage of those 14,400 seconds and thought it over for 14,000 more. How sobering it would be, breathless icon as traffic circle. Every day, Chevys and livery cabs inching around the stain of him. Shriekers on the school bus, tasting his blossoming funk in their clothes, having long ago given up counting flies. They should have left his body steaming on the asphalt while passenger side doors wrenched from 80s sedans, flaming barrels of garbage charred shards of drugstore and bare-chested boys, beautiful and bullseyed, blurred past in tribute. Black lives matter most when they are in motion. The hurdle and reverb matter. The rushed melody of fist, the shuddering of a scorched throat matter. The engine that moves us toward each damnable dawn matters. They should have left him there as proof. Eventually, the embers would have died in his hair. And I'm going to the back of the book, and I have two more here and then one more, and then that should be my time. The last one is a little long. This is from my father, and he stays dead. You can convince your young body to slide on the cloak of savage, bare your teeth toward the clock and pretend you don't feel the hollow. Or you can slap your own face, winding back time, beating yourself witless until years blur and you convince yourself it isn't real. The hollow is not menaced by your trilling. It decides to take your body inside it. You pile on layers of woolens and fiction, trying to appeal to the hollow as it owns you. Everyone asks, why is your voice so drained, so moon? It's because you are feverishly slipping on mantras that should heal the hollow, but it just grows larger and you flail around inside it. It is shaped so stupidly like a father. You can't find your knees to kneel. The hollow will be damned if it gives you a chance to pray your way out, so you will yourself limp and succumb to damage. Passing days seal the hollow. Daughter, wear your father like a cloak. Flaunt the blue, the gone stink of him. Those woes are yours, crafted to reveal your hollow. Last one from the book, Incendiary Art, The Body. I've nightmared your writhe, glum fists punching their way out of your own body. The blind stumble through the buckled vein of your throat as your nerve endings sputtered and blew. I've dipped my finger into a vaporous pool of your skin. The heat blessed your whole new self with horizon, square-jawed boy. With such potent intent, you blared illicit and just enough scent. Now, with so many northern days between us, you are much easier to God. But they are looking for you. They are wildly sloshing fuel across the landscape, and they are screeching your name. Today, one said, I sure would like to burn a black man alive. So yes, you left us here with undulating acres of fools and that particular stank leg of gospel. You left us all this snuff, hawk, and proud little bowleg. You left their brains stunned by dairy and fat meat. You left us not much path, even after your body was that brief, beauteous torch. They seem to remember you fondly, and there are unstruck matches everywhere. This, thank you all for listening so far. I'm gonna call up this other poem. This poem was written, a good friend of mine, John Freeman, is one of the editors at Lit Hub, and they have a series of poems that are letters. And it said it's letters to the times that we live in. And so John got in touch with me and he said, would you like to do one of these letters? And I said, oh, that would be great. I said, you want it in the form of a letter, you want it in prose, right? And he said, well, yeah, I guess you could do it in a poem too, but that would be too hard. And that, as anyone can tell you, if you tell me that will be too hard, that's what I do. So it's a poem that consists entirely of salutations. Take that, John. Okay. Dear floaters, bloated kin, dear flooded necks and reckless leapers manic for the flow. Though you are elegant in flight, your wrecks distress the ocean floor. The stark tableaus of sliding skin and swarms of slither set to drumbeat in your hollows. This is free, proclaimed by slaver's scourge. Do you regret rebutting scar with water? Dear debris, that ocean mothers all your rampant funk and spurts her undulating arms for you. She likes to think that you are simply drunk with purpose. Dear, the voyage never knew your name. You rise in pieces, loved to death, at last unshackled. Time will hold your breath. Dear wild tumultuous, your mouth, dear God, your mouth in fevered skirmish with the tongue, denying sound for rope or goldenrod. Dear mouth, still bulging with Atlantic, wrung into its new. Your tangled words are lash into the back, intending to explain the gritted teeth expected for a flash of rot, the hefted cock or breast, a chain that's wrenched away with clinging shreds of skin. Dear going to market, beauty on the block, seed driven deep. Dear chartered womb, within you squirms a tendency, a paradox. You trusted voyage, trust to kin, and found the tongue through tumult. Now you need a sound. Dear mute contrivance, graceless drudge, dear hexed, dear wily roots and conjures, dear persist with your existence, flaunting all that flexed and bumptious brawn, dear flagrantly dismissed, the writhing in the cottonwood, dear flail and drip, dear runaway who runs the hell away, dear prey for drooling cur, dear veil of Judas moon, its murmured decibel of light, dear cautious measurer of splay and fury in a heedless star, dear we, dear woman who must now learn to unsay her purpose as a mute machine, dear bee that's soft alive, dear man whose beating drum was lost at sea, what nouns will you become? Dear lurch and pirouette, dear flame facade, dear eye that won't dissolve. Your audience obsessed with shrinkage, fancies to applaud and whoop, but damn that eye in the suspense and dogged smolder of its wide aloud. Identified, of course, and doomed to swing, you vow to witness. Your enraptured crowd, delighting in your noosing as a thing to do not wish to be seen by you. Dear languid rumba, freakish scorch and sway, dear blackened reckoning, dear charred askew, dear stuff of nightmares seeping into day. The fire has died, there's nothing of you there, but they still see the fiction of your glare. Dear Langston, Zora, Louis, Josephine, dear Harlem, their rampaging stanzas, still explosive, whether they are sugar lean pronouncements from a horn, the thrill of stories touting faces like the ones who hallelujah every time they read themselves, or, not to be outdone, a pure astonishment of women. Need this nurture and this verb on dimming days. Dear, give you back your name. Dear higher ground. Dear noontime strutter, balancing pis-nays and being Negro all upside that town. Dear swinger to a thicker harmony. Dear every man they said that you couldn't be. Dear migrant on the Greyhound, stunned upright or crammed into a wheezing Plymouth or bewildered by the rails soon to ignite beneath your feet. Dear locked and shuttered door with you on both the sides. Dear bound to be more partial to the heat. Folks say the chill in old Chicago knows your bones. The key is birthing your own son and clutching till it walks with you. Dear you, already done, surrendering magnolias, feigning shame at chitlins, holding that amusing gun to your own truant heart. Dear faultless aim, dear northern body scrubs at what it must, that wily scarlet slap of southern dust. Dear edgy citizen, Dear crazed careen through multitudes of all the same as you, your skittish eyes outstretched, dear seen, and then as if on cue, unseen. You knew enough to heed the itchy siren song that cooed you through the rusty yawning maws of factories. Dear, often in the wrong direction. Dear, Chicago digs its claws in you. The rank air gorgeous with disease and pay stubs. Mayor Daley's startling swell, his pocked and blustered face, an odd reprise of those you thought you left behind. Dear bell that keeps on ringing, blues that hit their mark and make you dance all righteous in the dark. Dear, still a nigger in all kinds of light. Dear bullseye, trees rise up on spindly toes whenever all your skin strolls by. Dear, quite mistake of you, the way you dare expose your neck and walk as if you own a thing. Dear blue on you, and don't you wish there was a ship, one chance to take a frenzied wing into the ocean? Nothing but the buzz of flashers pinning you against the past. Dear suicide, dear bullet in the back, dear in the headlights, you're not tagged to last until the morning. You are tagged to crack beneath their weight, and don't you dare believe that any one of them will let you breathe. Dear George, Trayvon, Brianna, Bree Tamir, Alashiana, Dominique Jamel, Antonio, D'Angelo, Romir, Ashante, Botham, Terrence, John, Chanel, Stefan, Philando, Kentry, B, Laylene, Romella, Emmett, Eleanor, Monte, Janisha, Kiki, Alton, Mac, Francine, Tanisha, Eric, Dominic, Renee, Michelle, Elijah, Nia, Amadou, Akai, Monia, Cortez, Kentry, Sean, Alberta, Michael, Gabriella, Lou, Natasha, Brooklyn, Walter, Lee, Laquan, Ahmad, Mohammed, Elray, Aura, Shane, Rayshard, Denale, Sandra, Oscar, Blaine. Dear someone who woke up without a son, dear damn the dawning, echoes of a knock with no boy crouched behind it, nothing done to fix it. Dear reverberating shock, dear someone flailing, ripping at the air, dear hollow where he was, dear someone who's obsessed with resurrecting him, who dares believe the muck of bullet hole and bruise will ever breathe as anything but dead. Dear someone loving body on its way to being only body, just that red and syrupy annoyance hosed away when street decorum says it will. Dear damn, dear chalk all washed to none, dear traffic jam. Dear woman, wounded by the things you've heard, dear angry all your days, dear vibing wire on top your head. Dear, better watch the words you say to white folks, don't make them tired of you. Dear, wish you'd pinch those nostrils down, that nose is half your face. Dear, talk too loud. Dear, stay out the sun. You fool around, get blacker than you are. What, you too proud to settle for that ordinary man? Gonna be too late real soon. Dear, press those naps. And don't you dare tell me that you plan on yelling about that Black Lives Matter mess. Who in the hell do you think you are? Dear, who in the hell do you think you are? Dear someone who woke up without the sun and spun the blues. The singer moaned so hard the record skipped to save itself. Dear done so wrong. Dear frying lettuce in the lard. Dear wonder could a matchbox hold your clothes. Your child's been scraped up off the boulevard. Since then, ain't been yourself. Do you suppose some rebel yell can find you, hit you hard? Dear someone who has chosen just to rust instead of breathe, here's how they lie to you. Your child will keep on dying and you must keep punching play to watch him blue and blue until he trends. Then he's a photograph who laughs at you and rips himself in half. I rip another page in half. Dear, dear, and start again. Dear floaters, bloated kin, dear flooded necks, dear wild tumultuous your mouth, dear God, dear mute contrivance, graceless drudge, dear hexed, dear lurch and pirouette, dear flame facade, dear Langston, Zora, Louis, Josephine, dear migrant on a greyhound stunned upright, dear edgy citizen, dear crazed Kareen, dear still a nigger in all kinds of light, dear George, Trayvon, Brianna, Bree Tamir, dear someone who woke up without a son, dear woman wounded by the things you hear. To anyone who wakes up without the sun. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank all you guys.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was a devastatingly beautiful reading. I'm so glad we could have you here virtually. One of my biggest regrets about not having you in person is that we can't fill a room with applause at the end of something like that.
That's so nice of you. Thank you.
That was really beautiful. In a minute, I'd like to give the audience a chance to ask a few questions, but first I'd like to ask one or two myself. I was thinking about Gwendolyn Brooks, of course, as you were reading, and I was wondering if you could talk a little more about your relation to Gwendolyn Brooks, and maybe about the Golden Shovel anthology that you co-edited with the University of Arkansas Press, and you know, and I have a follow-up to that, but I'd like to hear what you think.
Okay, do that first. All right, like I said in the reading, I'm from Chicago. I am from the West Side. That's the side of town everybody tells you to stay away from. And I realized that growing up on the West Side, I was always looking over my neighborhood toward whatever was next. You could actually stand on the street in the West Side and look down and see downtown Chicago. So it was all my focus for the longest time was out there. And when I started writing and discovered Gwendolyn, discovered Gwen. When I discovered Gwendolyn, I realized that I had been missing so much by not looking at where I was and seeing how valuable that was, how valuable the voices were, how valuable I was, you know, to be in that space, how lucky I was, how I didn't look at the, you know, the pump jockeys and the guys bagging groceries and the livery cab drivers and all that. And those were the voices that were going to make me a writer, you know. So I volunteered early on to work at a bookstore called Guild Books. And the great thing about Guild Books was that all these authors would just come through. They had readings, but they always had people just coming through. And so you'd be shelving books and Eduardo Galeano would come in and you're like, you know. And Gwendolyn Brooks not only read there, but would come in every once in a while to see what the new books were and to talk to everyone. And so I kind of met her as this Chicago voice, the soundtrack of the Chicago colored girl, really. And that she was just very plugged into the community. And then somewhere else, she was famous. You know, I mean, she was street famous in Chicago, but there was a reading there. The first time I saw her before I started talking to her, there was a huge reading that was supposed to bring together the street poets or performance poets and the academic poets. There was supposedly a huge rift between them, and you know, like we didn't all use language. And it was 50 poets in a blues club over the course of a winter afternoon. And she was there, and she was sitting toward the front, and she stayed there, and she would watch some of the poets who were in middle school and grade school, and she would talk to them not just about, oh, that was a great poem, but she would remember lines in their poetry, and would make it her business to stop them and talk to them about their work. And I noticed that, and I said, this is the way to be. This is the way to stay involved in community. It's a way to show everybody that their voice is legitimate, you know. And so when I did my first book, which was a total fluke, you know, Louis Rodriguez of the Tia Chucha Books just asked, who's got a manuscript? Anybody ever ask you if you had a manuscript, or you just say yes? Just say yes and then worry about it when you get home. So I said yes, and I wanted her to blurb my book, and everyone was going, oh, she's gonna be too busy, and you know, she's Pulitzer, and I asked, and she said sure, you know. And so my first book has Gwendolyn Brooks blurb on it, and she to me represented the life that so many of us could be living if we just let loose on the life we think we want. So you'll see that a lot of my work to this day is not it's where I think I should stay. It's the voices. When I used to go to open mics and people ask me now, well, who are your favorite writers? And I think about some guy who just got out of jail and comes straight to an open mic because he's got something he needs to say. And the school secretaries and the restaurant workers would come in, and people who saw that day. There's a Gwendolyn Brooks open mic award in Chicago just for that reason. People who see the value in having this ongoing human conversation with other people. When I was approached by Peter Kahn of the Golden Shovel, first of all, Terrence Hayes is one of my favorite poets, and he's wildly inventive. And so when I was approached by Peter and anything that has anything to do with Gwendolyn, I was like, yeah, I'm in it. So I got to see the horrifying world of putting an anthology together. So I learned quite a bit with that. But it was also not a selective anthology in the normal way. We were really looking for this to go on to be used as something in schools as a teaching tool to introduce people to Gwendolyn. And also, I think I just saw, was it today, the New York Times? There was write a Golden Shovel thing. Yeah, it was like, here, everybody, need something to do, write a Golden Shovel. I was like, oh my God, yeah. So it's now become a bona fide form, which is wonderful, which means that people who are not aware of Gwendolyn will become aware of her through knowledge of that form. So that's more than we could ask for, and it seems to have an incredible shelf life. It keeps coming over and over again. I've used it in my classroom to teach the shovel. People are now doing variations on the shovel. So once people start doing variations, it's here to stay. Exactly. So the worth of that book and the honor of being involved with it, I can't tell you how much it means to me to be involved in something that has Gwendolyn's indelible stamp on it that way.
Well, it's a wonderful anthology, and I think of you as not only do you have certain kind of subject matter overlaps with her and shared concerns, obviously, but you share a sort of virtuosic, formal and protean formal talent, where you and something you said during your reading sort of made me think about this. When you said that will be too hard, and how that serves as a motivating force for you. And I think about like your Golden Shovel, black poured directly into the wound, as not only did you do the standard Golden Shovel, but you kind of doubled the degree of difficulty by making the Gwendolyn Brooks's language go up the first words as well as down the last words. And you've also written a number of sort of other extraordinarily difficult forms, like the Motown Crown of Sonnets. And I was just wondering, I wanted to ask you about this kind of difficulty and these kinds of constraints, and what you think about the relation of constraints to creative process.
I'm going to say one more thing about Gwen that has to do with this too, but it's a lot of what she did with language is just unreachable. It's not really something that you can study and say, okay, I've got it now. So in that spirit, I remember, I got introduced to poetry by getting up on stage and doing it, and then was told that there was a certain aspect of poetry that didn't belong to me. It's like, you do this, And then there's this academy stuff over there, and you don't have to worry about that. You guys are rebels. Just go on it, you know. And the more I learned about it, the higher that wall got in a sense, you know. And so when I went for my MFA, I was determined. I spent a couple of years with like the mistress of meter, determined to learn uh, the things that, you know, I would read poems over and over sometimes and not know why. And then I figured out it was something technically that that poet was doing to help heighten my response to the poem. But I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know, you know, how to do it. And so I was that person in the front row in the MFA thing. What's that? What's that? I don't know what that is. I never heard of that poet. I mean, you know, because I dedicated 2 years to myself, you know. And I think what comes in it on too is my performance poetry background, because I was in a competitive, I was doing the poetry slam for a long time. So it's learning the forms, getting comfortable with them, trying to figure out, you know, I talk to my students all the time about signature. You know, at the end of this semester, I want everybody to put in some poems without their names, and I should know who it is because of what you've learned, the choice of you've learned to make through the semester. And I feel the same way. And I think learning the forms, bringing the forms to really contemporary arenas, you know, contemporary subject matter, using, you know, supposedly ancient dusty forms and revitalizing them that way, but also learning them backwards and forwards so you can tear them up. You know, so you can tear them up, so you can say, okay, the rule is this. The rule is words down the right hand side. Well, let's see if I can do that in the other direction on the other side, you know. And plus I'm still trying to push people to say learning it's not enough. You know, it's not enough. And I know you know, and it's not uh it could be looked at upon as a device, you know, you do something wild with this poem, or it could be sometimes what the poem is asking for. That's been the most valuable thing about learning form, is there were all these poems I had that weren't working. I didn't know why they weren't working, and it was because they were asking for something I did not yet know how to do. You know, that they are there are some poems or some topics that you need repetition. You know, you need stress, you need repetition. And until I learned, you know, what a villanelle was, I didn't know, you know, I didn't know there were forms like that, you know, and I didn't know what what it was asking for. So the more you learn, the bigger your toolbox. And if ever your poems come questioning, you'll have an answer for them. Yeah. So yeah, I love form. I love the way the music of it hits the air. I love embedding it in poems. Sometimes people go, they I hear something, not quite sure what it is. It makes it rubs the slate clean every day, and there's something new that I can do or pick up from or learn from someone else.
I think we all loved hearing it on the air tonight. That was I'd like to open it up to questions now. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat bar. I love that answer about form, and Gwendolyn Brooks was such a virtuoso. It's just, like you said, I completely agree with you that you just, not something that the Aniad, I mean, or something like that. Yeah.
No, it's I'm still learning things. You know, you're reading along and you think you got it all, and you go, what did you just do? You know? And I'm a friend of her daughter's, our daughter Nora, and I've talked to Nora and said, can you just please? She said, I don't know either. Yeah, I don't know either. Just yeah.
Let's see, waiting for questions here. Let's see, still waiting for questions. Might have to ask you about what you thought of Lovecraft Country or something.
Yeah,
okay. What advice would you give a poet who is wanting to actively add more sound and rhythm into their poems? This is from one of our MFA students.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about revision, and then I get two things for this. The revision thing is I revised 3 times. The first time is because I'm pretty heavily narrative, and most of the time when I sit down to write, I'm trying to tell a story. So to make sure that whatever excited me about the story and led me to the keyboard or to the writing pad is in the poem. Sometimes you can poet out things, so I want to make sure the story is there. The second thing is language. Uh, if I've heard it before, I take it out, and that's not just the important parts of the poem. That's the inconsequential things, the little segues, all that stuff, because we tend to have a comfort language. It's like, I'm going to put it down like this because it's always been said like that. That's the way people always say it, and I've been made very aware of those when I'm writing, and so I like to try and find moments of language like Gwendolyn Wood, where you say, I've never heard that word used in that way, but it's just right somehow. And then the third thing is music. It does matter to me a lot how a poem sounds on the air. I think that comes from performance. I talk and I'll write a line, I'll say it over and over again till the second line comes. And then I'll say the second line and the first line over and over again till the third line comes. So it becomes kind of internalized, and and this is not fair, but I listen to every single type of music. There's nothing I don't listen to. Gregorian chants, I don't care, my husband says we could make money just crossing the country and finding jukeboxes and betting everybody in the place that I can sing 95% what's on the jukebox. And maybe. So that stays in me. I'm a Motown baby. I listen to lots. I love violin, listen to lots of violin, listen to a lot of jazz. I love blues. And so I feel like every poem, no matter what it's about, needs to have its own rhythm. And depending on the topic, a rhythm of one poem is different from the rhythm of the other. So it's like a piece of music almost, So incorporating sound, I play a lot with assonance, in alliteration. I had paid no attention to them at all. And then when I started my MFA program, my professor, it sounds funny, Annie Finch, she was looking at my mouth. I was talking to her one day and I said, "Are you scanning what I'm saying?" And she said, "Well, yes, I am." And it so happens that reading poetry aloud all the time and revising for sound meant that I was revising into a meter. I just didn't know what it was, So I read everybody's poems out loud, every book I have, and I have a lot of books now because I'm judging a big poetry contest and there's just books all over. But I read everything out loud. I know when I'm drawn to something sonically, I start looking technically at what they've done and why that is. So listen to as much poetry as possible. The things that sound harsh and kind of, you'll know them. And the ones that sound musical, you have to get a copy of the poem and read it and see where the burst of sound is coming from. But if you read everything, you'll start to hear it in your work, because when you revise that last set of revision, you're revising for sound, you won't stop until you start to hear that music.
Yeah, thanks for that. I got a couple other questions from the chat. I'll give them to you both at the same time. One person wants to know, how are you doing, and don't you need some water after that reading?
I saw that. Thank you so much.
And
Danny, where's Danny? Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. That's just somebody that I've known for like 30 years. Oh my goodness. Hi, Danny, wherever you are. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead
It's
now.
hard to, yeah, I'm not sure which screen he's on. And then Shalini Rana, one of our MFA students, says, what do you feel are some of the challenges and rewards of writing a golden or double golden shovel poem?
Um, well, the reward in writing the when it was solely focused on Gwendolyn was the discovery of so many Gwendolyn pieces, and people would take lines from her fiction. I did an entire poem. Some people would take lines from the poems. So it was just an amazing way to be introduced to her. And then, of course, it sort of spread out, and now a golden shovel is just about anything that you want to work down that right-hand side, secret message, love poems, all that kind of stuff. Uh, just basically as the reward for me is doing it so that if I don't tell you that it's there, you don't know. As with any other form, to make sure that it doesn't sound strained, that it's obvious that you did something because you're using words you would ordinarily use, or you're heading for the word zygote or something, and you're like, no, Um, and so it does test your skills without you getting into the scanning thing with form or sestinas or anything like that. The form is very simple. It can a second grader can do it. A second grader can do it. An experienced poet can do it. It's easily adaptable and twistable and changeable if there's any other things that you know that you want to do with it. But I guess the main reward for me is just being connected with something that Gwendolyn Brooks is connected to. And also that it's such a pliable form. There's so much that you can do with it. And I'm always happy for something that I can take into schools. A lot of my poetry doesn't translate very well if I'm going into a grade school or a middle school. So I've been writing poetry for elementary school students, and also looking for forms and things that I can go into schools with.
Well,
And this is definitely adaptable.
that's a great segue into Danny has a question, another question.
Hi, Danny. I see you now. You gorgeous little dumpling, you. Hi.
He wants your elevator pitch definition of poetry for a little kid.
Elevator pitch. Mm. Danny has haunted my dreams for years, and he continues. I would say that poetry is the feeling of a sound. That would be my elevator pitch. It's the feeling of a sound.
That works for me. It sounds good. And maybe one last question. Hiba, who began by introducing you, has asked, how do you navigate the academy, a space that's predominantly white, as a poet of color?
Wee! Well, the one thing, in every stage that I've gone along, there has been someone waiting to define me, to say, okay, you are a performance poet, you belong here. And why are you now in this book? Why are you now in this place where I am? Because I've won a Pulitzer and I'm on the Academy, the chancellors of the Academy of American Poets, and you shouldn't be here because we have not legitimized you, And I'm so, I feel so bad that I can see poets who, with tremendous amounts of talent, let other people define them all the way. And the first thing was, you're too loud. You are you're putting too much feeling into your poems. You scare people. So just stay in this performance side thing. And it was mostly white people with money, okay? Because we hadn't been sanctioned and we were getting lots of audience. So it's like, why are they getting all this attention? What do we need to be doing to keep them away from us, you know? And I remember I went to a reading where there were a lot of readings like this where they had an established poet, kind of a mid-career poet, and then the hired entertainment. And I was always the hired entertainment. And I was the hired entertainment because I would read a poem and not hold paper up or something. Oh my God, you know? And so they bring me in. This is one of those newfangled, people without paper, you know? And I was the hired help, and the established poet was Sharon Olds. And I still had that feeling in my head that I wasn't doing, you know, real poetry, because so many people were telling me that you're just pushing buttons, you're not doing real work. And so I I was forever in fear of being like discovered. It's this, you know, oh my God, I'm not doing real work. And I watched Sharon Olds, and she got up and she said, she looked at me in the audience, she said, I am in awe of you. And then I listened to what she was doing, and what she was doing is she was telling stories the exact same way. She read them out of her book, but they were still stories. And so I saw this kind of tunnel of energy. I mean, we're all storytellers, you know, and people who've never stepped up in front of a mic doesn't mean that they're less of a storyteller, you know. And the way I've done it is I've said, I'm in charge of my life story, the telling of my life story. If I don't tell it, I give somebody else the chance to. And I came awfully close to letting people define me, because I felt I didn't have the qualifications sometimes to be where I was. I went to a MFA program that was in Maine, you know, a whole heck of white folk, you know, and I started talking to some Black people and saying, come on up to Maine. You know, there'll be like three things every day that will piss you off, but you will get a really, really good education, and you'll get to be close to some really good writers, and you will get to define yourself. You know, nobody's here. There were a couple of MFA programs that said, you can stop the way you're writing now. You can now write the boom boom way. I want to almost say it out loud. But that you can remain in control of yourself. And it was kind of like a social experiment for a while. You know, I learned in workshop that every once in a while somebody was going to say something stupid. And later on we had some African American faculty, and we had seminars, you know, where all the questions you ever wanted to ask Black people, here we are, you know. And it took a while for that to catch on, and eventually it did. And you know, it wasn't all hearts and flowers, you know, but it was a space that needed that. And that happened. And also on the other end, I was going to a residency called Cave Canem. And Cave Canem is a retreat for African American writers. And the summer that I was leaving for my MFA program, I was sitting at a party, and at that party was Rita Dove and Lucille Clifton. And I was telling them about my MFA program and how, you know, and it was like that commercial. It was like the old Verizon commercial where all the people are walking behind you and stuff. I just felt that kind of strength, and realized that if I don't speak up for myself in this space, I won't ever learn to do it correctly. I'm going to be buffeted about by people the whole time. And so I was very selfish about what I wanted to get from that program, you know, and I did. I got exactly what I wanted. You know, it's being selfish, it's realizing that there will be people whose intent is to maneuver you and to box you, and to get you to believe in the box that you're in, and that it's the best place ever to develop and establish your voice and strengthen it. Because I'm constantly in spaces like that. You know, it's not like I did that and I've just got, every time I walk into a room, I'm sized up the same way, the same gaslighting happens, the same I have to, you know, I was at a thing with a lot of people with lots of money, and I did a poem that I had written for the thing, and I was outside signing books, and a woman came up and said, "It would be so good if you would stop being so angry." You know, and I'm like, oh, here we go, you know. So I, you know, and I asked her, what did I say that made you think I was angry? Because it wasn't an angry poem. I said, if this person, this white poet had done it, would it sound angry to you? And she was like, well, I don't want to get political, you know. So you have to kind of rewind every time and go, okay, what will it be this time? It's an unending source of entertainment, you know. But you just have to, I think writing poetry, every time you write, you're getting closer and closer to your own voice. I don't even know if I have all of my own voice yet, but that also has to be the voice that you speak with. You know, if I can write it, I can speak it. I'm sorry about the time that I wasted not believing that I belonged in every space that I walked into.
That's maybe the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much again. I hope that sometime in the next couple of years, maybe we can get you to Arkansas for real.
Sure.
For another,
that would be great.
Another event. It's been a real privilege to listen to you, and I'm grateful for you reading to us and talking to our students. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. What are you guys are all going to the party now, right? No. Thank you, Danny. I love you. Richard, I love you too. I love you too, Peter Mason. He's got a great smile. I don't even know who it. Every time I looked, he was smiling. So I was like, okay. All you people who have your cameras on, I really appreciate you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the invitation. And I hope to see you all soon. Richard, I've got to see you somewhere.
We'll catch up.
All right. Danny, you haven't aged a minute. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you again.
Thank you. On behalf of the University of Arkansas MFA program in creative writing and translation, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. I'll see some of you guys tomorrow, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thanks, Patricia.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Jane, for doing all this.
and Leah.
Thanks, Leah and Jane.
Thank you all. This is a great night.